Museum Advancement Administrator for Ste Genevieve Museum Learning Center. I'm involved in all aspects of advancing our mission here at the museum, primarily through grant writing, but also through other work that helps us to offer programs like this Missouri Humanities lecture series. And we want to extend our thanks to Missouri Humanities Council. They provided funding through a grant that enabled us to offer this program. They really do great things, and they're providing monies for a lot of organizations to do really good work, and we really owe a debt of gratitude to them. We also thank our co-sponsor, Ste Genevieve County Library, Director Sean Long, as well as all of our lecturers, you the participants, museum board staff and volunteers, and everyone who had a hand in making this very special event possible. Today we're in day 2 of a 5-day lecture series with our second lecture, Exploring Missouri Heritage by Skip Weiler. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Skip. Mike Skip Weiler was born, raised, and attended Graydon High School in Ste Genevieve. He describes himself as a local ex, except for the 10 years he spent in the 1980s living in the St. Louis area. He worked in schools for 30 years, serving as an athletic director, a coach of various sports, elementary teacher, and high school American literature teacher. Skip has portrayed a spirit in the award-winning Deja Vu Spirit Reunion for a number of years and gives tours of the historic Guibourd-Valle house in Ste Genevieve. He presented the Beauvais family history in 2018 and will be giving the LeClere family history at the 2023 Jour Fete Project Pioneer Family Event, and is currently president of the Foundation for Restoration of Ste Genevieve. So, ladies and gentlemen, Skip Weiler.
Thank you, Laura. The handout I gave you, we're going to start off, and Laura's going to pass some pens. Turn it to the back side, the side that's blank. And I'm going to start by having you list just 5 things to 10 things that come to everyone's mind about Missouri. So when you think of Missouri, what comes to mind? Just real quickly, I want you to jot. Try to get 5. If you can get more, go ahead and get more. 5 to 10 things that come to everyone's mind about Missouri.
These will be a test.
And whenever I see you no longer writing, I'll know that it's time for me to tie that in.
We're sharing each other. Thanks. You all got pens? Great. What else?
5 to 10 things that come to mind, everyone's mind, about Missouri. Looks like a lot of you have done a lot better than I did. Okay, I think we can move from there. I'm going to read Catherine Armstrong, Missouri Fun Facts, from May 6, 2022. She says that some things in Missouri are so iconic that they immediately come to mind. She listed 14 things that Missouri is known for outside of Missouri. One of them she listed, and you can just kind of see if you have any of these. One she has is the University of Missouri, or Mizzou, the Pony Express, barbecue, Budweiser, Kansas City Royals, Tornadoes, Mark Twain, Gateway Arch, Farmland, Crazy Good Pizza, Civil War, Meth, Branson, and Harry S. Truman. Now, my list, I came up with 5. I did not have the Pony Express, I did not have barbecue, I did not have Budweiser. I did not have the Kansas City Royals, but I did have the St. Louis Cardinals. Tornadoes, I did put Mark Twain. Again, I read this, and it came to my mind, but I would have been thinking Mark Twain ahead of time. The Gateway Arch, I did have the Arch. I did not have Farmland, but I did have green, because I've always heard that Missouri was described as a green state, so that came to my mind. I did not have Crazy Good Pizza, Civil War, Meth, Branson, or Harry S. Truman. I had the St. Louis Cardinals, I had the Gateway Arch, I had green, I had Mark Twain, and I had the Ozark Mountain Daredevils. So, is there anyone that wants to share, or is there anyone that had some of these? A couple maybe? A few? But I'm sure nobody had Kansas City Royals. I would doubt. I mean, we don't think of the Royals at this side of the state. And another ones. But just like Missouri means something different to different people, Catherine Armstrong, to me, she probably lived on the west side of the state. For her to say the Kansas City Royals. And the Pony Express. But again, just like Missouri means something different to different people, heritage will mean something different to different people. What does heritage mean? Heritage is a person's unique, inherited sense of family identity. It would be values, traditions, culture, and artifacts handed down by previous generations. Heritage brings to mind different ideas for different people, just like the analogy I did with Catherine Armstrong in her Missouri Fun Facts. So again, different ideas for different people. We observe a sense of our heritage throughout our lives as we observe and experience the things that make our family unique. Although not every inherited trait, tendency, or tradition is positive, we generally consider heritage to be a positive and meaningful elements of our family's identity that we incorporate into our own lives and pass along to succeeding generations. Now, fabric, stories, and culture. Those 3 things, one or all, make up historic heritage of a place. Fabric would be the physical remains that exist today. So, fabric of Ste Genevieve, physical remains. First thing comes to mind is going to be probably the houses, the historic homes. Stories, memories, oral traditions, and written records. Again, that would be part of what makes up a heritage. And then we have culture. Heritage events, collect antiques, practice today's skills from the past. Okay, my focus today is going to be on a lot of the stories in the 1700s of the area, and not all of them will be positive. But I'm going to give you a variety of our heritage. And it's going to be a part of my heritage, and it's going to be part of it. But it's, again, heritage is going to be different to different people. All right, let's start in 1682. This is way before Missouri. In fact, my whole presentation today is before Missouri. I'm getting to the roots. You know, this is before Missouri came about, 1821. This is all before. This is our heritage. All right. Again, 1682. There were numerous Native American tribes that were in the area, and they all had their own culture. But this is when Robert Cavalier claimed the territory for Louis XIV of France. In 1686, there was a man by the name of Henry de Tonty who helped establish the first permanent European settlement in the lower Mississippi River Valley. It was called Post of Arkansas, or the Arkansas Post. From that time until today, the area has been called, in no particular order, but close maybe, New France, Illinois country, New Spain, Louisiana, Upper Louisiana, Upper Louisiana Territory, Spanish side of the river, Spanish Illinois, French side, Post of Ste Genevieve, District of Ste Genevieve, the village of Ste Genevieve, the old town of Ste Genevieve. It's been called Missouri. It's called Mother of the West. And then finally we have Ste Genevieve, or what it's called today. So again, we're talking about the region. We're talking about the area. Present-day Ste Genevieve, Missouri was included in all these descriptions. The area on both sides of the river was one, but the river was not a hindrance. It was, people went back and forth across, and like no big deal. So let's go back to Henry de Tonti. He was an Italian-born French military officer, explorer, and voyager, who assisted Guibourd-Valle with North American exploration and colonization from 1638 to 1686. Now, this comes from the Illinois Historical Collections, French Foundations, volume 23. It's a copy of the document of the engagement of Jean-Baptiste Beauvais de Saint-Gemme to Henry de Tonti. Henry de Tonti, captain of a company of the Marine and governor for all the King of Fort St. Louis in the country of Louisiana, under authority of Mr. Robert Cavalier, Esquire, Lieutenant General for His Majesty in the aforesaid Louisiana, being present, has declared that he has made the following bargains and agreements with Jean-Baptiste Beauvais, son of Jacques Beauvais, inhabitant of this island, here present, and assenting that he is to stay, that the aforementioned Beauvais shall immediately set out from this island with the aforementioned de Tonti to go with him into the aforesaid country of Louisiana, and being there to go among the Indian tribes and to trade well and faithfully. This was October 14th of 1684. It was done and concluded in Montreal. So, Jacques-Baptiste Beauvais de Saint-Gemme, 1684, made his way towards this area. I'm going to back up here now. Jacques-Baptiste Saint-Gemme Beauvais is the son of Jacques Beauvais de Saint-Gemme, who married Jean Soleil. They were both born in France. They married in 1654 in Montreal, Quebec. Jean-Baptiste was 22 years old. Jean-Baptiste Beauvais was 22 years old when he hooked up with de Tonti to come and trade with the Indians. Now, Jean-Baptiste Beauvais never settled in this area, but he had 3 siblings who had children that came, this total of 8. 8 grandchildren. They were all first cousins, but 8 grandchildren of Jacques Beauvais and Jean Soleil. They were nephews of Jean-Baptiste Beauvais. Even though Jean-Baptiste did not come here, again, there were 8 nephews of his that did and settled in this area. So I would consider them the first family to be in this area. And this is kind of where it all started. Raphael Beauvais, he married a Turpin. He had 3 boys, Jean-Baptiste Beauvais, Raphael Beauvais, and René Augustin Beauvais, who all came to Kaskaskia. Barbé Beauvais married a Bourbonnais, and her son, Jean-Baptiste Brunet Bourbonnais, he came to Kaskaskia. And then Marie Charlotte Beauvais, again, all siblings of Jean-Baptiste, the one who hooked up with de Tonti. She had 4 sons, Jean-Baptiste Turpin, Louis Turpin, Joseph Turpin, and Jacques Turpin, who all came to Kaskaskia. Now, Fort de Chartres was a French fortification, first built in 1720 on the east side of the Mississippi River in present-day state of Illinois. It was used as the administrative center for the province, which was part of New France, of which Ste Genevieve would have been also. Now, you can't talk about Fort de Chartres without talking about Kaskaskia, and you can't talk about Kaskaskia without talking about Ste Genevieve or this region. Again, the first family to come to the region were the 8 grandchildren. They were all first cousins of Jacques Beauvais, did St. Jean, and Jean Soder. All right. Now, Jean-Baptiste Brunet de Beauvais was born April 6, 1673 in Montreal. He, on November 8, 1723, he served as a witness to the deaths and debtors of the estate of the late Jacques Bourdon, captain of the militia at Fort de Chartres. Jean-Baptiste Beauvais, Jean-Baptiste Turpin, Louis Turpin, and Jacques Turpin were other family members to witness and sign this document. So, 1723, we know that Bourbonnais, Jean-Baptiste Brunet de Bourbonnais, was in the area. Jean-Baptiste Turpin, the oldest of the Turpin brothers. The first time he appears in the Kaskaskia manuscripts was on March 8, 1723, when he was a witness to the listing of the debts and debtors to the estate of Lake Bourdon. Louis Turpin, he was the second oldest of the Turpin men to arrive in Kaskaskia. Louis Turpin first appears in the Kaskaskia manuscripts the same time his brother, Jacques Turpin, first appears in the manuscripts. On June 25, 1723, both of them appeared to be witness to the will of Jacques Bourdon, again, captain of the militia. Jacques-Francois Turpin first appears in the Kaskaskia manuscripts June 25, 1723, same as his brother Louis, when they serve as witnesses to the will of Jacques Bourdon. Jacques-Francois Turpin next appears in the manuscript on July 4th, 1723, 8 days later, when an inventory of his effects were taken. He passed away 8 days later. He was 25 or 26 years old, and he left no descendants. Joseph Turpin, he first appears in the Kaskaskia manuscripts of January 15, 1735, a little bit later. The few entries in the manuscripts are interesting and give us a complicated image of this man. Joseph Turpin. Concerning a house and lot from the estate of the late Jean-Baptiste Turpin at Fort de Chartres, which Beauvais had yielded to Joseph Turpin upon Turpin's claim of being its rightful owner. Beauvais asked that Turpin be ordered to restore the house to its original state, since Turpin had removed all the windows, all the doors, and all the rafters. A few months later, on April 15, 1741, we find an entry in the Kaskaskia manuscripts by Joseph Châteauneuf, a trader in Illinois residing in Kaskaskia, to give his 3-year-old son, Pierre, to Joseph Turpin and his wife, until the boy reaches the age of 20, in gratitude for the Turpin's care for the child, who has lived with them since his mother's death when he was 3 or 4 months old. And then on October 15, 1748, we have an entry in the manuscripts, Kaskaskia. We find an order by de Berthet and Beauvais in response to the complaint by the citizens of St. Philippe against Joseph Turpin, who was making wine in the commons behind the village and is accused of felling all the timber near the village, breaking fences, blocking the roads with the down timber, and allowing livestock to enter the village fields through the broken fences. So he was kind of a controversial man, Joseph Turpin. And that might be why he doesn't appear in the manuscripts nearly as much as his brothers and his cousins. We have Raphael Beauvais. He first appears in the manuscripts on June 11, 1729. He serves as a witness to the inventory and evaluation of the property of André de Guibourd-Valle. His name is listed as Beauvais the Younger. He is the younger brother of Jean-Baptiste. René Augustin Beauvais did St. Jean. It appears that Augustin Beauvais was more adventuresome than the other family members. It lists an agreement by Augustin Beauvais, who's a voyer of Montreal, to enter to in service to accompany Jean Chaperon and company to trade at the post of the Missouris and the post of the Osage. More than 2 years later, January 27, 1746, we find an entry that is an acknowledgement by Augustin Beauvais of New Orleans now. He's in New Orleans, who's a voyer in the Illinois. So he didn't settle in the Kaskaskia area until later. And then we have Jean-Baptiste Saint-Jean-Beauvais. He's the older of the boys, of the 5 boys. He's the oldest of the 3 boys that came. He first appears in Kaskaskia manuscripts on July 1st, 1723, when he serves as a witness to the document where the inventory of the property and effects of the late Jacques Bourdain of Kaskaskia, captain of the militia. So, I have a lot more about the Beauvais, but I'm not going to give them to you at this time. Some of the descendants of the family names of Saint Jim de Beauvais, living in Ste Genevieve area today. Jean-Baptiste Beauvais. Some of his descendants were Beauvais, the Bonterre Grimingers, Saint Jim, which are primarily people who live Potosi and Park Hills, or where the Saint Jims are. Picous, Kossuth, Dunsey, Douglas, and then all the LeCleres. We have Raphael Beauvais. His descendants living in the area today are Beauvais, Doza, Beauvais, Beauvais, and the Menards. Rennie Augustin Beauvais, he's connected to the Lorimore name of Cape Girardeau. Louis Turpin, Beauvais, Doza, all the DeRouches, Gendrons, and the Groggs. Joseph Turpin has none in Ste Genevieve. His line went from Tessier to Cavallo in Louisiana to Clifton in Mount Enterprise, New Mexico. Jacques Turpin, he has no descendants. Jean-Baptiste, no descendants. And we have Jean-Baptiste Brunet de Guibourd-Valle, whose descendants would be the Beauvais, Gendron, and Menards also. So there's a lot of crossing over, and a lot of those names I think you would be familiar with today. We're talking about Missouri heritage, and there's this historic Beauvais home that was to be raised in St. Joseph, Missouri. It says, one more link of this Missouri River town with St. Louis is due to fall soon under the wrecker's hammer. The link is the old Beauvais home at 2nd and Michael Streets. The brick residence was a wedding gift from Joseph Robidoux, the St. Louis fur trader who founded St. Joseph, to his daughter, Mrs. Sylvanie Robidoux Beauvais. Robidoux, who founded this town, which was to become a city of 80,000 people, gave the house to his daughter on the day of her wedding, April 26, 1847. It was on that day that she was married to Francis Augustus Beauvais, also a St. Louisan. The large 2-story brick residence, built by slaves and artisans, brought upriver from St. Louis, is to be raised to make way for an urban highway improvement plan by the Missouri State Highway Department. So, that's part of our Missouri heritage that is gone. And I think most of you are very well aware of, some of you may have attended the Bob Mueller presentation a few weeks ago about the historic homes that we lost here in Ste Genevieve and the ones we saved. But we had a lot of homes that were lost, and we were yet able to save a lot of them. I think losing this home in St. Joseph, it's sad. It's probably the best way I can describe it. It's sad. I'm going to give you another handout here. That's the teacher in me. I'm going to give you this, and this will be a little bit of But I want you to take a look at this, and then I will reference it for you. Now go ahead and take a look at this. And now this, as I mentioned, the Missouri heritage means something Missouri, and heritage means something different to different people. Now, when you look at this list, somebody want to share what they see or what they think? What is this? Yes, Laura.
Root names of some common names today.
It's common names today of people living in Ste Genevieve or in Ste Genevieve area. Where do you think these names came from? They came from the Kaskaskia manuscripts. Going through the Kaskaskia manuscripts, it was one of the references that I don't know if anybody had a chance to read the Kaskaskia manuscript. The only way you can read it is if you Google it, and it's 1,600 pages, and it's going to be civil documents translated from French to English by Laura, Sina, and Margaret Brown, Dr. Margaret Brown. But these came from the Kaskaskia manuscripts, but the key to me is when they're dated. And one might want to take a guess of what. 17, they're all prior to 1740. All these names were in Kaskaskia prior to 1740. Actually, it's prior through 1737. The first one is Roy, R-O-Y. There are Roys living here. The second one, anybody want to share maybe who they think that name is? Yes?
Tomyer?
It is Tomyer. It is Tomyer. And the full name was Tomyer de Source. And then it was shortened to Tomyer. Yeah, and there are numerous Tomyers living in St. Genevieve. There you go. Yes, numerous, as you well know. The third one, of course, would be Abishai. The fourth one probably is no different, Landier. La Rose, numerous La Roses, and it was actually Guibourd de La Rose, and the Guibourds kind of made their way to Fredericktown area, and the La Roses stayed here. It was common for the French, the Dits to, like St. Jim did Beauvais. St. Jim's went that way, Beauvais stayed here. The Guibourds went that way, the La Roses stayed here. Beauvais, this is one of my favorite ones, Beauvais. I've seen it listed as St. Jim de Beauvais, St. Jim, Beauvais, St. James, Beauvais, 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 and Beauvais, which is what it is now. All the Beauvais. They butchered, this name got butchered worse than any name from its original French, Saint Jean de Beauvais, all the way down to B-O-V-A, Beauvais. Talking to Lila Bova, who I referenced in the book, she blamed it on a teacher somewhere back. And I did get the B-O-V-E, that came from St. Mary's book, where it listed students, and one that was listed B-O-V-E, that would have been Beauvais. But again, I blame it on the census takers. Somebody's taken the census, and it would have came that way too. So between the teacher and the real blame would be they were English. Whoever they were English, they were not French. So they butchered the name. After the Beauvais, we have, of course, Beckett, which has changed today to B-E-Q-U-E-T-T-E, as opposed to B-E-C. And the Beckett was a master locksmith in the Kaskaskia manuscripts. We have Gerard, we have Renaud. The next one, has anybody? Langley, which today is ends in L-E-Y as opposed to L-O-I-S. Then we have Martine, Roulet. Anybody who's seen any of the trucks rolling around, or the Roulet brothers? Yeah. Moral did sans regret. Of course, that would be the Morals. Dozer, no different. Menard, spelling with the T. And also in the Kaskaskia manuscripts, again, the source for these names, it was all depending on how it was pronounced and how they wrote it. So they dealt with the phonics of it, more so than the actual spelling, depending on who the notary was. And it would change throughout the time, because through the whole life of the Kaskaskia manuscripts, which started in about 1720 and went to about 1816, there were numerous notaries, and they would write the names differently, depending on how it sounded to them. Pepin, which of course is Pepin, and he was a master mason. We have, it says bucket, but it's actually Buat. That would be the Buat. Buat? Yep, is that it? Huh?
Yeah.
So it's B-U-A-T-T-E.
Right.
Correct now, but this is what it was in the beginning.
You could tell on that second one that it was spelled phonic.
Pardon?
The phonics. Yeah.
Oh.
A-T, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right, exactly. Yes. We have Declue. We have Maurice. We have Goldbro. And then we have Labriere, which Labriere, this is the original spelling, and it's spelled different today, L-A-B-R-U-Y-A-R-E, I believe. And I've heard it pronounced Labriere. And I've heard that a lot. The Potosi, again, out in that area, they pronounce it Labriere. But around here, it seems to be Labriere, which I like the sound of that a lot better than Labriere. Then we have Daruche, of course, numerous of those. Boyer, and we have Sharon, which is actually Karen. Yes, yes. So, anybody have any questions at this time? I'll just check here. Any questions or comments? Because this is interactive, and I want it to be as interactive as it can be. But
So all of them lived in Kaskaskia?
yes, all these people were in Kaskaskia prior to 1737. And again, the reason why I picked these names out, because they're around here today. They've been around, these families have been around that long. Yes. And if you notice, there are some names that are missing. Like the Valleys. The Valley, they weren't until the mid to late 1740s before they showed up in the area.
And wasn't that La Valley?
La Valley, yes. Yeah. La as in the valley. Yes. Yeah. Like LeClere, which we know, Ellie. LeClere didn't arrive to the area. They never went to Kaskaskia. They came directly to Ste Genevieve, and that was 1770. So that was quite a bit later. But then again, if you think hard enough, there's probably a lot of names that are missing that we know are French, and we know they've been here a long time. But these were the original names up till 1740. So.
How many people get to Kaskaskia? Did they come down there Ohio?
Yes, most of in actuality, most of them, I like to say that they went from France to Quebec to down the river to Kaskaskia. Most of them did come down the river and to Kaskaskia. Right. There were some that went from Mobile and came up. Mobile, Alabama. They were in that area because in reading some of the Kaskaskia manuscript entries, it says, from Mobile, or married in Mobile. It says that. So you know that they came up.
So what was the primary reason they come here?
They came to Kaskaskia, St. Genevieve?
Yeah.
Well, a new life. Again, things were, the way I like to look at it is the French were getting away from the English. The English kept squeezing them out, taking, and that happened later on, of course, whenever they were exiled. The English exiling from Canada to New Orleans.
Do you think some of those people went out like the old mines and that, because that area is 1702? And I have a great-great-grandfather who's down in Perry County that was from, he fought the war and was here in the 1700s. He had a whole lot of ground down there.
Again, when you were on the Illinois side of the river, it was no problem. Everybody had a boat or a canoe, and they would come across, and they mined. I'll be reading a story shortly where they talks about a quarry on the other side of the river. Right. And they were just back and forth. So, mine Lamont, down by Fredericktown, that was an early mine, which they would go mine there and stay. And I think Francois Valley, one of his sons, actually got killed by Indians down there. But they would go across the old mines too. I think the old mines is an old mine, of course, and they would go mine it, and they would stay in the area.
Is that what the
Lead,
mine?
right? They mine lead mines. Yeah, the lead mines. They mine lead there. Yes. Yeah. So I think a couple of reasons: a better life, and squeezed out. There wasn't that much. I guess if you wanted more, you're a big family. Just like Germany, you're running out of land and an opportunity here. And, Francois Valley, made his way in the 1740s here. And, he had it big. And others had it big. It was just more space, and, it was start to boom.
So when you go to the Menard House over in Chester, over that area, they talked about crossing the river every day to farm on Caspi Island, and they would go back every night and cross that river every day to farm. And they said it got so bad they couldn't spend the night over here because the Indians were so bad.
The thing, Kaskaskia was not an island until later, whenever the river ran through the middle of it. So they would cross into the other side to farm, yes, which is the current big field. They would cross that farm. The Beauvais had property and would farm it, that's documented. But they lived in Kaskaskia until they finally, picked up, and the whole family, all the folk moved to Ste Genevieve in 1789. But they were still had, they had roots in Ste Genevieve because they had a lot of farmland also on this side. And that was common to farm both sides. Wherever the best land was is where they farmed.
Back in that time frame, were the land grants given to these families? How big a parcel of ground were they given?
That varied, and it would be given in arguments. And I'm going to talk about this now, but if you drive over the Marina Road, and before you get to where the Marina building was, if you look down the field, you can see the arpents. You can see the long, thin pieces of ground, and that's where they were. And they all had a portion to the river, and they all would go to the bluff. But they were all, each had a piece of the river.
At 40 acres.
It would be more than that. Dependent. I might get off track for a second, but my family, the LeCleres, they had 450 arpents in the big field. That third generation here, there was a lawsuit. One family sued the other family. The family in Ste Genevieve sued the family in Potosi. The two brothers, there was the original LeClere, then they had two sons, and one son moved to Potosi, the other would say, well, their kids, and the Ste Genevieve. Ste Genevieve sued them. They were the plaintiff. The Potosi was the defendant because of the property. So it ended up being sold in the courthouse in 450 acres, big field. There were 7 in that family, and they sold it for $150. 450 acres, prime, big field, you know, just because for some reason they couldn't.
How big was the market?
Margaret's a little bit smaller than an acre.
Smaller?
A little bit smaller than an acre, yes.
Okay, now they were long skinny strips, right?
Yeah, long, thin pieces, right.
Yeah. Now, do you know the reason why or why it was?
Well, mainly so each of them would have a portion of it by the river.
Why were they long? Yeah, by the river, but they were long and skinny also.
Yeah, the long, skinny portion,
All right,
yes.
They were joined to the river so nobody could keep them away from their property. They could always find their property through the river.
So they all had access. They all had access.
They all had access to
There
water.
was-
Yeah, and they would go all the way to the bluffs.
Now, were the plantations in the south? Down there, they got 40-acre plots that are long and skinny, they all connect to the river, for access to the river. But the reason why they told us that they were long and skinny, they wouldn't have to turn the mule teams around as much.
Well,
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that would be the same reason, yes.
Now, there was no surveyors at that time, so you had to plot your own piece of ground, start from the river, and you travel so far back. That's the only way you could track the property. Is that correct?
But they all had access. They all had access to the
Yeah.
river.
Yeah,
Yes.
The law was you had to plant a pecan tree
yeah.
on the corner of your
On the
property.
corners.
Yes. And a lot of those pecan trees are about gone too, aren't they?
Yeah, not many of them left.
No.
But when I was young, you drive down to St. Mary's and you could see all the trees in line still.
Yes. Yep. I know exactly. And it's the same thing. Like I said, you drive over Marina Road and you look down the field as far as you can see, and you can see the different farmer's home, whatever, you can see the crops different, the long, thin pieces, which, you know, are in arpits. Those are remnants of the arpits left from way back in the day.
Who owns it now?
Different people.
Oh, people still.
Yeah, different people own the farmland and they farm it, you know, but for it being sold over the years, you know, nobody's gone in and bought up, you know, the whole portion of it.
Nobody would sell it.
Well, we did. Our family did.
You were forced.
Well, I don't know why they did it. They couldn't get along. They weren't using it for whatever reason. I have a general idea, but that's, you know, would be part of more of my heritage, my personal heritage. But, anyways, since we're cousins, third cousins, so, all
They
right.
had a big family feud.
Yeah, it was. That's what it was. It was a family feud over the land, and I don't understand why the Ste Genevieve LeCleres were suing the Potosi LeCleres, and I guess unless they weren't using it and they thought it was a burden because they had 450 acres and it was growing up, and of the 6 LeCleres, 4 of them headed to Galveston, Texas, and there are only 2 here, and you know, and 2 of them didn't want it, so, and they weren't doing it. They dumped this land on us, and we don't really want it, and you know, I mean, what I wouldn't do to have 450 acres of a big field of hay. I mean, anybody, you know, that would just be really nice. I'm going to read a few stories here for you that come right out of Kaskaskia. And they're in no particular order of the dates, but again, this is part of our heritage, regional heritage. On May 5/5/1740, there's agreement by Joseph Leroux to enter the services of Baudin of Kaskaskia as a warrior, to travel to New Orleans and back for a wage of 225 livres and portage in his boat for 12 pots of brandy. So he was going to get 225 livres, which is the French dollar, a 10-to-1 ratio, and 12 pots of brandy. 6/24/1731, there's a sale at auction of a cask of brandy from an estate by Gerard with the permission of de Ternay, commandant of Kaskaskia, and agent for the Indies Company. The brandy is to be sold in 5 lots of 4 pots per lot, each to a different purchaser. In 1731, we have an agreement by Etienne Segal to make the voyage to New Orleans and return with Jour for a salary of 1 cask of brandy, the cloth for 1 great coat, 4 shirts, a hat, a pair of stockings, and a pair of shoes. On 1/16/1732, we have a sale of a house and lot in the prairie of the establishment for 600 livres of flour. So there's kind of a theme going there. If you didn't notice, anybody catch up on, how they were paying people? And, they paid people differently. Flour, which was common, or clothing, or brandy was a big one. I'm not finished yet either with brandy. 1730. These are all very early stories here in the Kaskaskia. Promise of emancipation of Joseph and Marie, Negro slaves, upon his death. This is LeClere. So there were, again, as we all know, there were free blacks and enslaved blacks in Ste Genevieve, in Kaskaskia also. As far back as 1730, they promised to emancipate their slaves. 9/19/1726. This is an agreement between Sassafras and LeClere. There's LeClere again. Settling a dispute over some brandy. LeClere owes Sassafras 51 minats of wheat, 416 livres of flour, and 4 hams. So, again, they were trading in not money, but they traded in whatever they had. And again, brandy was a big one. This one is from quite a bit later, but I'm going to include it because some things just don't change. This is from 5/24 or May 24, 1773, quite a bit later. Agreement by the children of the late Jean-Baptiste Beauvais, and this is the Jean-Baptiste Beauvais I was referring to, the early settlers, and when I use the name Beauvais, I think of them as the first family of the area, because there were 8 of them that came here and settled. Because most everybody else at that time, they were part of there were a few here and there, but most everybody else were really part of the militia. But the Beauvais actually came in force, in family, and settled. And that's why there are so many descendants of the Beauvais today. Agreement by the children of the late Jean-Baptiste Beauvais to give an annual stipend to his widow, their mother, consisting of 400 livres of flour, 3 livres of coffee, 4 livres of sugar, and 2 pots of brandy. January 9, 1738. This is a survey by Barrios, who's a sworn surveyor, at the request of Hoover Fine of a parcel of land acquired by Fine from Beckett in the prairie that the Indians sold to the French. And this was executed at Fort Charles. Now, the reason why I'm sharing that is the Indians sold land to the French. I was not aware that took place, that the Indians would sell land to the French. I always was under the impression that actually it was taken from them. All the land was taken from the Indians, but this is, I guess, to kind of show a different side. It wasn't all taken from them. Some of it was actually sold. And 1740, May 10, 1740, acknowledgement of Pierre Messager of his obligation to deliver to Pierre Beauvais of Fort Charles in exchange for pelts received 180 pots of brandy and all materials necessary to make a complete suit of fine clothing for Beauvais. So, again, the different things that they would trade. January 3rd, 1740, we have a sale of land at Kaskaskia by Nicholas de Vangenot to Edmond Guibourd-Valle, master smith, both of Kaskaskia, for 450 livres in the form of 4 years of blacksmithing to be done by Guibourd-Valle. The reason why I put this in here, if there are any Guibourd descendants, your ancestor was a blacksmith. So, and the same thing with the Becketts being a locksmith. So, but 4 years of blacksmithing to be done by Guibourd-Valle. January 3rd, 1740, sale of 3 by 50 arpents of land at Fort de Chartres by Jean-Baptiste Beckett, master locksmith of Kaskaskia, to Antoine Chesneau de Sans-Guerin, master shingler of Kaskaskia, for 1 cow and 100 livres. So again, what they did to, and I came across one, I didn't write this one down, but somebody sold a house, and what they paid for it was brandy, and that was it. They traded a house for brandy. So I'm not saying that the French were, well, I guess I am. They enjoyed it. They like to. They like to have a good time, but that's documented.
What is a livre?
Livre would be the French term for money, like a dollar. For that many dollars, and the exchange rate is 1 to 10. So I like to say that the Spirit Reunion, part of my presentation when I portray Francois LeClere, is that his estate was valued at 53,000 livres, which equals 10 to 1, $530,000 today. So in 1790, the LeClere's estate was valued at $530,000, which was a lot of money today, a lot of money back then. They were worth $530,000. But I also say, and this is a part of my not so good part of my heritage, but do you know what the most valuable asset was? Those of you who heard my presentation.
Slaves?
Slaves. Yes, exactly. The slaves represented 20,000 livres. 40% of the estate was the value of their 9 slaves. So we weren't as rich as we thought. No. And of course, as time went on, we got poorer and poorer.
So what was the population of slaves? There was also Indian slaves.
Oh yes, for a while. Yeah, and then they were out.
Like 5%, 10% of the population?
Well, actually, early Ste Genevieve, the population of slaves, there were more slaves than there were non-slaves in Ste Genevieve.
I was always told it was only like 3% of the population.
There was a lot of slaves. I saw a number of census of 600 and something people living in Ste Genevieve. I thought 400 of them were slaves.
Really?
Yeah. So.
What year?
That would have been 1780s, I believe. I'm not sure that census. But about that time, just to give you an idea, right?
But most of the slaves were treated the same.
Oh, yes, exactly. And I like to tell people too, that with the family of the LeCleres, they buried one of the slaves with the family, and of course they baptized them. It was the French would baptize their slaves, and they would give them a Christian burial, and allow them to get married. And so yeah, slavery it's not good. I'm not saying that. I would never say that. And but the French in Ste Genevieve, I like the story of the Battle of San Carlos when Francois Valle gave the slaves guns and they went up and fought the battle, fought the English, and the natives that were siding with the English, and saying, look, they gave them guns. if you're, slave, you trust your slave with a gun, you would think that they're going to point it on you. But again, Francois-Valley sent the slaves up there and with guns. And another story I like that somebody questioned him back about, why are you giving your slave guns? He said, well, they have to protect themselves in case they run into some tigers in the woods, I think he was kind of being funny, with that, but, that's...
So where did the slaves themselves, where did they come from?
That they would have come from the West Indies Company.
No, I mean, did they come down through Quebec?
No. They would have come up. They would have come up
through
from
New Orleans?
well, they would have came from. They would have come from the West Indies area. They would have come from the Caribbean. They would have come from Saint Domingue, Haiti.
So how did they get to Castile or Ste Genevieve?
The Indies Company, West Indies Company, that was their business. They would sell slaves.
Did they have a market?
There's a market for slaves, yes.
Here in this area?
Yes, with the French, they would bring them up and
I didn't know.
sell them. Yes, people would buy them, slave. Oh, there's again, just like you're buying anything, they'd
Didn't they
sell
sell them on
slaves.
Merchant Street?
Pardon?
That they sold them on Merchant Street.
Yeah, is there a place in town here?
Okay, what?
I don't know.
That I really do not know, but I know they originally came from South, and then of course they reproduced, and once we were born into slavery, they were here. But the original ones would have been all through the West Indies. And I might touch on that with one of these stories yet. Let me see if I can find 1740. There's agreement between Pierre Pellet de Lassande and Reverend Father Tartarin, pastor of the parish of the Immaculate Conception, and the present and former church wardens, Charles Pépin, Joseph Abishon, and Antoine Jour. Lassande will cut and deliver to the church 50 toises of good stone from the quarry on the other bank of the river. And this was executed at the rectory of Kaskaskia. So again, a reference to the quarry on the other bank of the river. And 50 toys of good stone from a quarry. And I'm not so sure, but what quarry this may have been, but it might have been the one down off by Dodge Creek. Yeah. Isn't that an old quarry?
Yeah.
That's where the stones were.
That's not
Quarry Town Road.
Yes, right. Yes.
East Bridge come out of that stone.
Yes. So a toise is an old French unit of length equal to 6 French feet, or 6.396 United States feet, or 1.949 meters. So those are pretty good sized pieces of stone that he was going to be delivering. Does anybody need to stand up, take a break, use the bathroom or anything? Or I'll go ahead and keep going here. So I want to try to stay. Okay. All right, June 1st, 1725, there's agreement by Chassin. This is going to be kind of a lengthy story. I've been giving you bits and pieces. This one you're going to tie together. This one's got like about 8 to 10 Kaskaskia entries, and it's going to put a story together. And this is not one of our good ones. It's kind of got a negative intonation to it. So this is agreement by Chassin to deliver to Le Plume, a Negro convict, Perico, to work for 3 years in exchange for 1/3 of the wood he cuts. That was on June 1st, 1725. Then on August 12th, 1725, a request to the Provincial Council by Chassin, keeper of the company's storehouse, that he be permitted to gather information against one Perico, suspected of involvement in theft of the storehouse. Permission granted at Fort Charles. August 12th, same day, 1725, order for the arrest of Andre Perico, Negro convict, for attempted desertion and theft by Nicholas Michel Chassin, based on evidence of several persons. 8/13, the next day, 1725, interrogation of Pierre Perico, a Negro convict, concerning accusations of desertion and theft. Deposition of LeClere in the case. Then 2 weeks later, August 27th, 1725. This is a request to the Provincial Council by Chassin for permission to have Perico, Negro convict, accused of theft, whipped. Request based on testimony of Perico and Antoine Play, and on the prisoner's past convictions for theft at Mobile. So he was in Mobile before he came. Application of judicial torture rejected in favor of whipping because the company needs convict labor. 8/27/1725, same day. Deposition of Pierre Perico after he was whipped and admitting robbery in the storehouse and stating he had no accomplices. Followed by August 28th, next day, deposition by Perico accusing 2 Negroes, Petit Pierrot and Creole, of being accomplices. 8/28/1725, testimony of Creole and Pierrot denying the charge by Perico of being his accomplices in theft. Confrontation of Perico with Creole, Pierrot, and LeClere. Upon a threat of further beating, Perico withdraws his accusation of the 2 Negroes. 8/29/1725. Listed documents examined in the case of Perico. Conviction of Perico and recommendation of the royal attorney to be hung after the application of judicial torture. 8/31/1725. Visit by Chassin of the Provincial Council to the condemned thief, Perico, who declares his intention to appeal to the Supreme Council. Judgment of the Provincial Council that execution of sentence should proceed immediately. And that was the last entry about Perico. So, he was hung. They ended up hanging immediately. All right, another short story here. April 14, 1726, a complaint by Deliette, the commandant, by Jacques Richard, accusing Claude Cheneveau of defrauding him of 600 livres in merchandise in a card game played with a marked deck. All right, a week later, April 20th, 1726, certificate of Baptiste Lavigne and Leonard Billeron, witnesses to the card game between Richard and Cheneveau, that Richard did not complain of a marked deck while they were present during the game. 4/22, 2 days later, 1726, deposition by La Riviere that on the 9th of April, Cheneveau and Richard played cards at his home with a deck that Cheneveau said he had purchased from Deliette. La Riviere examined the cards on that evening and found them to be marked. April 29th, again a week later, 1726, arguments in the defense of Claude Cheneveau, accused of cheating at cards by Jacques Richard. That was the end of that story. So I don't know what happened, but we do know a couple things. We do know that they had cards, in Kaskaskia at the time, and they played cards, and they cheated at cards. I'll share a little bit of story about Francois Edmond LeClere, which would have been third generation here in Ste Genevieve. He was deaf and dumb. And I heard this from Ellie. This would have been from your great aunt, Melba. She told me when I had a chance to visit with her, and I was picking her brain. She said, "Oh yeah, he was deaf and dumb." And she goes, "There was a story that he would play cards, and people would stand behind him and cheat, tell other people, so he would lose." That's maybe part of where the LeClere fortune went. Awesome, but he would lose money in card games because people were taking advantage of it. And I also think, he was born in 1809 and he lived into the 1880s. He was a very old man when he died. But I just keep thinking, he was born deaf and dumb. And I saw it on an early census, like the 1830 census. I'm assuming he was born deaf and dumb, and he was when he was, a teenager, he was deaf and dumb, and then how difficult that would have been, you know, during that time to not be able to speak and not be able to, you know, to hear. But again, he lived a long time. He married twice. First wife passed away before they had any children, and then you know, my great-great-grandfather and Elliot's great-great-grandfather, Gustave Benjamin LeClere, you know, would have been one of his sons. So, again, a lot of things, you know, they had cards back in the day. All right, December 20th, 1730, declaration by Bastion that one Jean Bax struck him in the presence of La Rose. 1221, the next day, interrogation conducted by De Terman of Jean Bax, the Negro slave of miners Tézier, concerning the accusation by Bastien, the tenant farmer of said miners, that Bax assaulted him. Bax affirms that the injuries to Bastien occurred accidentally during his struggle to avoid being beaten by Bastien. This was at Fort Chartres. So this guy was going to beat the slave. The slave accidentally hurt the guy in the struggle. All right, 1222, the next day, opinion by De Terran, the commandant in the name of the Indies Company, that the Negro slave Jean Bax be physically punished according to Code Noir for assaulting Francois Bastien. And then again that day, 1222, the sentence. The sentence by commandant and officers of the garrison of the post of Illinois, following the opinion of De Ternan, officer and business agent for the Indies Company, that the Negro slave Jean Bax be condemned to make a public apology upon his knees to Bastien. And due to the plea by Madame to know that mercy be shown, the death penalty is not invoked, but Bax shall be beaten on 3 different days and shall bow down before Bastien whenever he meets him. I put this in here for a couple of reasons. Again, this is part of our negative, the bad, but also it gives a lot of information in these manuscripts about De Ternan. He was an officer, a business agent for the Indies Company. You know, it just gives you information, you know, about people. Of course, there are no one around here that name, but it gives a lot of detail. I'm going to turn to a person, Janet. On April 28, 1745, an agreement by Janice Weiler in Illinois, residing in Kaskaskia, to take charge of the pelts belonging to Louis Benevu de Lisle, trader in Illinois, residing at Fort Chartres. During Benevay's absence from Kaskaskia on his trip to Detroit for a wage of $350, Janice agrees to protect the pelts from mites, insects, and other dangerous vermin with an inventory of the skins. So this is the first entry where we find of Janice. It is Nicholas Janus, the builder of the Green Tree Tavern. He's described as a voyager, a voyer, in 1745. He's described as a voyer, a voyager of someone who comes and goes. So he was not, you know, permanent yet in Kaskaskia, or not considered. 2 years later, April 26, 1747, list of merchandise belonging to a partnership of Andre Roy, who was dangerously ill with Joseph Brazeau and Nicholas Janus, voyeurs in Illinois. So he's still a voyager 2 years later. Made at the house of the widow of Jean-Baptiste Jour, where the partners have their shop. So again, 2 years later, he's still considered a voyer. All right, and October 31st, 1747, sell a lot and house at Kaskaskia by Francois Xavier Rolette and his wife, Marianne Fouillard, to Nicholas Janice and company, traders at Kaskaskia, for $525. So, from April to October, he's become a part of the community. He's no longer a voyer, but he's a trader. Again, 5/18/1751, a few years later, sale of a house and lot at Kaskaskia by Nicholas Janus, trader in Illinois, residing at Kaskaskia, to Guibourd-Valle for 400 livres. So that's kind of the evolution of Nicholas Janus. Let's see. This is one of my favorite stories, and there's a reason why I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to kind of ask you if you know why it's kind of ironic. November 24, 1781, a statement by Louis Lateraut that Antoine Buat's pigs escaped through a break in Janus's fence near the gate, which had not been repaired for more than a month and a half. It also states that some of the pigs which were killed were extremely fat and some were half fat. I just love the way they turn it. And then we have a deposition on April 27, 1782. This is a few months later, but we have a deposition by Beauvais that during his tenure as syndic, the portion of the common fence belonging to Janus was properly repaired as required. Now, does anybody know the irony there? Or if not, I'm going to tell you what it is that Nicholas Janus was the father-in-law to Beauvais. So Beauvais, was not going to rat out his father-in-law. He said, whatever happened here, Nicholas Janus, if his fence was not repaired and the pigs did get out, Beauvais was not going to, again, punish his father-in-law. So I'm thinking he made it up, so I don't think everything that people said back in the day was truthful. Some of you had to kind of, weed through. So, again, the irony of that is, he gets to, I guess, cover for his father-in-law. Here's another one about Nicholas Janus. And when I say Nicholas Janus, again, he's the builder of the Green Tree Tower. And then I talk about Beauvais. His house also is still standing, and it's 20 North 4th Street, next to the shop where Yvonne LeClere lives. Here's another one about Nicholas Janus. This is an interesting transaction dated May 15, 1781. It shows a sale of a black horse belonging to the state of Virginia by Patrick Kennedy, Deputy Conductor General, the country of Illinois, to Nicholas Janus of Kaskaskia for 40 minuts of maize paid in full. So he sold a horse for 40 minuts of maize to Nicholas Janus, and there were 3 witnesses to sign this declaration. And I found these names to be very interesting. It was Pierre Langley, Joseph Page, and a man by the name of George Rogers Clark. So we know that George Rogers Clark was in the area at the time and had a rapport with Nicholas Janus. We also have the marriage contract of Nicholas Janus and Marie LeClere. Can be found dated April 25, 1751. Marie LeClere was the daughter of Jean-Baptiste Tarnier de LeClere and Marie-Françoise Rivard. Jacques, Jean-Baptiste, and Regis Tarnier LeClere would have been her brothers, and Joseph Chauvin Charleville and Genevieve Rivard would have been her uncle and aunt. So, Nicholas Janus married a Tarnier. So if you're related to the Tarniers, you are related to Nicholas Janus. So you would then be a cousin to me, and you're a cousin to Ellen. And here's one from April 27, 1746. Again, I bounced around a little bit, but this is the will of Francois Valle. This is not the final will of Francois Valle, but the will of Francois Valle, trader of Kaskaskia. So we know that he was in Kaskaskia. He was not a Boyer in 1746. It was made in anticipation of his departure for a trip on the Wabash. Legacies of 1,000 lavurs to the Church of the Immaculate Conception, 1,000 lavurs to Jean-Baptiste Gouin de Champagne, Master Smith of Fort Charters, 500 lavurs to Francois Corset de Coco of Kaskaskia, 1,000 lavurs to his cousin, Pierre Charette, and 1,500 lavurs to any of his brothers who might by chance come to the Illinois, and the remainder to his partner and good friend, Joseph Libreville de Jossin. So that kind of gives us an early insight to Francois-Valle. He had a lot of money. We know who his cousin was, and we know that he didn't have any brothers here in the area. And he did. Okay, 1782, petition addressed to the Kaskaskia District Court by a group of Americans who arrived in Illinois several years ago and who have established themselves at Bellefontaine, requesting appointment of a person speaking English to help maintain order and harmony with the other villages. State that they wish to live in harmony with established law and to be a part of the existing community, but that their inability to speak French is the cause of some difficulties. The list of names followed by order of Judge Antoine Beauvais that the petitioners are to appear before the court to swear an oath of allegiance to the United States and an oath to support the actions of the court. I don't know why that would be in there, but they were just saying, hey, we don't understand. You're all French, you know, and it's again 1782. And they don't understand, so they want that. 11/20/1762, we have a sale of a house with a billiard hall. So not only do they play cards in the area, but they also play pool. January 16, 1763. This is my last one, and this one has a lot to it, I think. It's a sale of a public auction of a 3-story stone house at Kaskaskia, outbuildings and a lot belonging to the estate of the late Louis Turpin, done at the order of Judge Bowe on December 31st, 1762, in connection with the dispute between Paul Juzan, plaintiff, husband of Therese Turpin, heir of the deceased, and Francois Derouche, defendant, husband of Marie Joseph Turpin, also an heir. Bids also received on January 23rd and January 30th, 1763, when the property is awarded to Francois-Valle for 17,000 lavurs paid in full. This was at Kaskaskia. That wasn't the one I was thinking of. It was 1763, which is a key date. But this is the one that I really meant. This was in November. On November 6, 1763, the third and last round of bids on the land in a 3-story stone building belonging to the Jesuits at Kaskaskia. Jean-Baptiste Beauvais was awarded the property for his high bid of 7,250 lavurs. The second bidder was a man by the name of Pierre LeClere. Now, Pierre LeClere, anybody? St. Louis. Now, the dates here are the ones that have the kind of the impetus to it. This was November of 1763. Jean-Baptiste Beauvais was the highest bidder for this 3-story stone building. Pierre LeClere got second. It just so happens that Pierre LeClere leaves the area and finds the city of St. Louis in the spring of 1764. So, my thinking is, if Pierre LeClere wins this bid and stays in Kaskaskia, St. Louis is never founded. I mean, logic tells me that. I might be wrong, but I'm thinking that there's something. I gave you the one handout. I want you to go ahead and turn it over on the other side. And I got a list of names there. I got 2 blanks at the bottom. If you want to look at that, can anybody fill in the blanks there? There would be a name on the left side and a name on the right side. And I just want you to think about it. Look at all the other names. And we have Any ideas? Is everybody just completely stumped? Okay. If you're stumped, that's okay. This is a difficult question. But it's like whenever I was teaching and I gave a test, I'd always have a question somewhere that I was hoping nobody knew because I didn't want anybody to get 100, you know. But
That you, right?
huh?
That was your grandmother?
Yes.
And Dora?
Yeah, the one on the right, you could put me in there. That would be me. Under Dorsey and Stefani, that would be me. But let's go to the other side. Francois Janus, Nicholas Janus, John Baptiste Janus, Pierre Janus, Jewel Janus, James Felix Janus, go to Martha Janus, John Dewey Etheridge, and then that would be Melissa Etheridge. John Dewey Etheridge was Melissa Etheridge's father. So, you do the math, Melissa Etheridge, Ella, this would apply to you also, would be our sixth cousin, once removed. So, with the Nicholas Janus. Now, you're related to Nicholas Janus also. You're going to have to do your own. You can do your own genealogy on that. But I want to direct you to the middle column now. We have Francois Janus, Nicholas Janus, Mona Felicity Janus, and that would be the wife of Vital Beauvais. They had a daughter, Felicity Beauvais, their oldest daughter, who had a daughter named Felicity de LeClere, who had a son named James Felix St. Jean Beauvais, who changed his name to Felix St. James. He died at the Battle of Shiloh in 1762. And he's buried in Memorial Cemetery. But I want you to take a look.
1862.
I mean 18, what did I say, 17? 1862. Thank you. If you look then at the left column, James Felix Janus. And then you have James Felix St. Jean Beauvais. You know, I'm not sure, I can't say for sure, and I don't think there's anybody here that can support this, but if you look at who names their child James Felix without a reason? There weren't that many James Felix, first name, middle name around. James Felix St. Jean Beauvais, he would have died in 1862. James Felix Janus was born in 1864. He was born in St. Francis County. I'm thinking that Melissa Etheridge's great-grandfather, James Felix Janus, would have been named after James Felix St. Jean Beauvais or Felix St. James. Again, because they would have been cousins. They would have been, maybe third cousin. I'm not sure exactly here. Probably about third cousin, second cousin. I think they would have been second cousins. But you don't just, name, their reasons and names repeated. So I'm thinking again, Melissa Etheridge. She don't know this yet, but next time I see her, I'm going to talk about it with her. That your great grandfather was named after. I'm almost sure Felix St. James. So I may be wrong. But that's what I'm saying. I'm going to stick with it until it changes.
Okay, so these Janus, they owned that brick house?
No.
Where,
Recent Genesis? That would be the Green Tree Tavern, Nicholas.
this was a town where, David,
Who?
Carrie David.
Oh.
Because my dad, when he came here in 1948,
Good to see you.
he rented a room before we moved here. Before we moved here. I did it for Yeah, so how, that would have been a descendant somewhere else.
That I do not know, but it's quite possible later generation. I do know that there was a LeClere Janus, who was the editor of the newspaper, the Herald.
I can't remember her name, but
I want you to take a look at this and notice some of these signatures on here. This was the wedding, the marriage contract, the last page, the signature page of Francois LeClere II and Félicité Beauvais. That's why their names are the top two. But if you notice underneath that, you have the name as Janice Beauvais. Janice Beauvais. The women would sign their maiden name followed by their married name. Janice Beauvais would have been Félicité, Mona Félicité Janice, married to Vital Beauvais. And then you have Vital Beauvais' signature underneath hers. Vital Beauvais, of course, the house on North Main. Has his signature. Then underneath that, you have the signature of Nicholas Janice. This is just loaded with signatures from early Ste Genevieve. And what I found interesting is there were 3 signatures on here of 3 historic houses still standing today. You have Vital Beauvais, the Vital Beauvais house. You have Nicholas Janice with the Green Tree Tavern. And Nicholas Janice was a very old man whenever he died a couple years later. You also have Francois Valle on here. You have Jean-Baptiste Valle. You have the Jean-Baptiste Valle house across from the Welcome Center. It's still standing today. Well, I'm going to go a little bit further. You have Jour, that big signature on the left side. That would be Jour, and his house is in Cahokia, Illinois. It's still standing, built in 1806. Francois Valle too. You have Jean-Baptiste Beauvais, and he would have been the builder of the Amaro, the Beauvais Amaro house. So a number of signatures on here are a number of the signatures on here are people who have houses still standing today. But if you look at the Francois LeClere, it's his mark. He did not sign it. I found this kind of odd because this was in 1802. His brother Louis LeClere, whose name is on the left side, he signed Louis LeClere's marriage contract 2 years earlier. Why would he not sign his own marriage contract? Anybody? I don't know. Unless he was gotten into the brandy, maybe, or I don't know. But he did not sign his own marriage contract. His wife, Félicité Beauvais, is right below it. Again, Janice Beauvais, that would be Mona Félicité. We have the mark of Basile Valley. Basile Valley. Basile, a lot of you are familiar with the name Basile. Basile Valley, that's his. He was the godmother of Félicité Beauvais. The godfather. Again, there are a number of marks on here, and there are just a number of signatures that are again, this is early Ste Genevieve. This is kind of like I came across this. I said, wow, this is great. All the names on it.
How come so many people sign it?
Yeah.
Well, that was common. A lot of relation.
Everybody that was there did.
Yeah, and this was usually not the actual wedding, but it was a contract. And it says in the contract at the house of the lady to be married. This was actually at the Vital Beauvais house, is where this marriage contract was signed.
Maybe it was not that it was a shotgun wedding and you don't get married.
Pardon?
Maybe it was a shotgun wedding and you didn't want to get
Well, I don't know if he wanted to be married. He had some issues I'm not going to go into. It's kind of dark. He's got some dark sides to him. But
Maybe he wrote the contract.
yeah. No, he did not write the contract. Pratt's the one who wrote the contract. Yes.
What kind of things were spelled out in the marriage contract? Is it like a prenup of today, or what?
Yes, it would be. It would be like a prenup, and there would also be a dowry, what the wife-to-be's family is giving, and what the husband-to-be's family is giving. It's all spelled out in there, and it's all spelled out who the witnesses are and what they are, and then when it gets to the end, it's signed. And also where it occurs at, the date, of course. in front of Francois-Valle, military commander and civil commander of Ste Genevieve, and it goes to the post of Ste Genevieve, is how it would be described. I'm going to tie one thing in here, and this is American literature. We basically had English literature in the New World. We had Puritan writings. They were the early. And then we had the British allegiance, the American Revolution, Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson. They were influential political writings, distinctly American experiences. You know, the power of reason. And then we had the Enlightenment period. It's all part of American literature, 1760s to 1820s, the emerging of a nation. But here on the frontier, we had the Kaskaskia manuscripts. We had the civil documents. And we also had in Ste Genevieve, I'm going to share just a short writing of one of the few people who could actually, was educated, who could read and write. He was not illiterate like so many others. And that's Francois LeClere. I'm going to read parts of two wills. First, this was dated 1772. Before us, Don Francois-Valle, captain of the militia and special lieutenant to the judge of the post of Ste Genevieve, was present Mr. Michael Livernois, residing at this said post, being in good health, mentally sane and sound of memory and judgment, as it appeared to us, who, knowing the certainty of death, fearing to be warned of such without having disposed of his last wishes, personally came to us in our office. For the purpose of these presents, and made, dictated, and named his last will as follows. First, as a Roman Catholic and Apostolic Christian, he has recommended his soul to God, very humbly, imploring his divine majesty for mercy, to forgive him his sins, and to receive him in his holy paradise among those in bliss. And then it goes on. But just to give you an idea of the flow of the man writing, that was his style. Here's another one. Before us, Don Henry Peru, captain of the infantry, civil and military commandant at the post of Ste Genevieve, was present. Mr. LeClere, Francois LeClere, habitant of this post, lying sick abed in his home. However, mentally sane and sound of memory and judgment, as it appeared to said undersigned commandant, who, considering the certainty of death and the uncertainty of its time, fearing to be warned of such without having disposed of the wealth it has pleased God to give him, has made, dictated, and named to send undersigned commandant his present will and orders of last wishes in the following manner. First, as a Catholic Christian, he has recommended his soul to God, the Creator, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, imploring his divine kindness through the merit of the passion of our Lord Jesus Christ, the intercession of the glorious Virgin Mary, Saint Francois, his patron saint, and all the saints in paradise, to place same in the heavenly realm among those in bliss. Said testator wants and orders his debts be paid, and wrongs, if any be found, righted by his testamentary executor, hereinafter named, on whom he depends on for the care of his funeral expenses and alms. Said testator declares that, having acquired his properties in community with Miss Marie-Louise Valle, his wife, he wants and orders that she remains the mistress of everything until the majority of his LeClere, Louis LeClere, his son, and Francois LeClere, his son, at which time she will to each of them give 1,500 livres, and she will generally remain mistress of all the properties of said community by making said payment without need of any inventory, taking care of all the debts. Said test declares that a parcel of arable land which he has in this post, the hills, containing 6 arpents wide, by so many deep, he only reserves himself 3. Retroceding 2 arpents, come to the side in this, that's French, here divested, to Jean-Baptiste Morel, and 1 arpent to Mr. Lalande, habitant of the post. Said testament declares, having been paid for the inventory and auction of the personal property of Mr. Lesource by the garden of his daughter, by which 1/2 of said expenses are in the hands of the undersigned commandant, and owed to said guardian. I could go on a little bit. He also had 2 volumes belonging to Mr. Sarby entitled French and Spanish Grammar. And for the execution of the present will, he has named Maria Louise Valle, his wife, whom he requests to take such pain, and in whose hands he leaves all his properties according to custom, revoking all other wills. It goes on, but the thing is his style of writing. The first one was written by Francois LeClere, and the second one is written by Francois LeClere. He wrote his own will. He wrote the wills since he was the secretary for Francois Valle. He was a notary in Ste Genevieve. There's thousands of pages of documents in the courthouse, of which this would be one. It's in French. This one has been translated in English, but just his style of writing, it's so fluid, and some of the adjectives he uses. And again, in this one, he writes. In the first one I read, was present as it appeared to us. He says, Lenore, as it appears to us. But then in his own will, he says, as it appears to him, the commandant. Because again, he's writing this, and he's writing his own will, which, as he's lying in his sickbed, mentally sane and sound of memory, as it appears to be said by the undersigned commandment. And then he goes in, of course, considering the certainty of death. But I wanted to share that with you because, Francois LeClere, again, I'm biased, but he's responsible for thousands of pages of documents, and he was educated, and he could write, and so many couldn't. And, I really enjoy reading some of the things he says and how he says it. Because, again, American literature, you won't read about him in the American literature. I taught it for 9 years, and never once was this area even considered because everything was, Philadelphia and this and that. And it slowly made its way here, and changed, in the romanticism time or whatever. But anyway, that's a little bit about him. I'm gonna conclude here with a couple things. Synonyms for heritage: ancestry, culture, custom, legacy, right, tradition, ancestry, a person's ethnic origin or descent, their roots or their heritage. My roots: I would consider myself a French, Canadian, Creole, German, American. Each of us would be different. But the thing is the Creole. What's a Creole? Creole is someone who was born in this region whose parents were not born here. So Spanish called it Creole. So Francois LeClere, Fete de Beauvais, the wedding contract, I gave you, they were Creole. They were born here. The oldest person I knew growing up was my great aunt. She was my godmother, Kathleen Defani. She was born in 1896. Now, maybe some of you have someone older than that, but she never married, but she left a treasure of photos and cards and letters. And I have those, and I look through them off and on, and I think that's kind of neat. But she died in 1980, and I failed to talk to her. I failed to, and the same way with my grandmother, born in 1907, she died in 2008. I failed to talk to her about her history, the way things were. Her grandfather was Gustave Benjamin LeClere. He died in 1939. I failed to talk to my mom. She was born in 1930. She would have been 9 years old. I feel bad about that. A couple of things that I do have from my heritage that I've been able to hold on to and won't forget that need to send on to my kids, recent anyway, is that my dad, Irvin Weiler, he told me that the Weiler homestead is where Lake Forest is. So that's something that I can, get the image I can relate to. And then my mom, she talked about eating ketchup sandwiches during the Depression. Again, she was born in 1930. When she was a child, they ate ketchup sandwiches. So, you know, we need to protect our heritage. You know, we need to keep things, hand stories down. We need to write down stories that we remember about those who have gone before us. We need to write things down and remember about them. And we need to make up our own Missouri heritage and hand that on to those who are going to follow us. I heard once a good thing to do would be to have just people, you know, like at Christmas or whatever, you have the family, just write something down about, you know, those who you remember who are gone, you know, and so what's your remembrance of them? And it might be your grandma, the cookies she made, because my grandma was 100 when she passed away, so she had a lot of great-grandchildren, and I think she even had great-great-grandchildren, but I don't think they were, but, you know, just as something to hold on to that heritage, because, you know, things are, the information is out there, but it's getting lost in this tech-savvy world with the new generation. So, again, you know, if you haven't done it, you know, write some things down, and that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm going way back with my heritage, you know, and I'm bringing in some newer stuff, but it's really important that we protect your heritage. Thank you.